gross profit ratio. We need gross profit and turnover. These two figures should be in the income statement. So if you go to the income statement, we should be able to find both of these things in there. However, you can see that although turnover is there, gross profit is not there. So these kind of little hiccups, little complications you will encounter when you are calculating the ratios for your own company. Look into the solution, okay? And the solution is there, notes 2 and 3. So go to the notes, that's why we need the notes. So if you go to the notes 2 and 3, if you look at the segmental information, it gives us all the breakdown of how the revenues were generated, what were the different segments, areas, blah, blah, blah. But it does, which is the useful information, but it does not give us gross profit. So we'll move on to note 3. And you can see that in note 3, we have more detail about the company's income statement given. We have gross profit there, we have revenues there. So I'll pick the figures from here, 4047.3 and 4087.8 divided by turnover or revenue, 10698.2 and 10622. %. Is a big figure, so decimal place is not really needed. This means when M&S sells goods for £100, their GP, gross profit, is £38, which means they buy something for £62 and sell it for £100. This margin, this gross margin or gross profit ratio tells us about, it's very interesting ratio, it tells us many things about that. But in this case, the first thing we learned that the gross profit ratio is stable. It's pretty good without looking at the comparison. It looks good as well. If you look at Tesco, Sainsbury's and Asda's, you're looking at about 28-29%. But if you look at Burberry, Ted Baker, you're looking at around 60-70%. So it also tells us about the brand value as well. How much a brand can have, can add value. Simply buying stuff and then selling, simply putting your logo on it, that's your brand value basically. So if you're comparing it with other businesses in the same sector, you can assess the relative brand values as well. In this case, the GP is stable. A bit longer data would help us to assess this a bit more detail. Now, if the gross profit ratio is stable, that means the core of the business is good, is unaffected. And the core is that M&S buys products from suppliers, sells us to the customers. If this ratio is changing, for example, and this will be changing, for example, for businesses which are still growing, still developing. For example, Tesla, their GP margin is increasing because they are increasing their production and sales. When they increase their production, they're getting economies of scale, which means they're buying their raw material cheaper, which increases the gap between the sales and the cost of the sales value. Then their supply chain is getting more efficient, which helps to reduce the cost of the raw material. And their manufacturing processes are also getting better. So we have known that the ramp-ups in their different factories, which is helping them to reduce the cost of production. So if a company is taken off, like Tesla, the GP margin would be increasing. But then a stage comes when GP margin starts becoming stable. For example, and Apple was in the taken off position 5 years ago, but if you notice the last 2-3 years, their margins are becoming more stable now. So this tells us about the company's life cycle as well. So when a product GP ratio becomes stable, then that's the point where the company has saturated its market share. They are still a good company, but maybe they can't exploit the growth as much anymore. And the Coke was there like 100 of years ago. Coke stayed there for 100 of years, very stable GP. And like in the last 10 years, the GP has started declining because people are changing. Coke is not as good anymore as it used to be. And same thing will happen to Apple eventually when we may not be using phone anymore. Don't get sad, yeah. We will have better alternatives maybe. Maybe Neuralink from Elon Musk would help us to communicate without any phones. And then comes the declining phase. If the GP is declining, if the margins are declining, then the company maybe is in decline mode. Examples are the German car manufacturers, or generally traditional car manufacturers, Ford, Toyota, or Audi. Their margins are declining now.